Welcome to Porch Talks. I'm Melissa Bradley, founder of 1863 Ventures and co-founder of New Majority Ventures. This summer, I invited some friends to my porch in Martha's Vineyard. These friends are seasoned leaders, funders, and entrepreneurs who are committed to creating Black wealth. I wanted to talk to them about their experiences, professional and personal. I wanted to go beyond the tips and tricks of starting a business to hear what it feels like to be part of a fast-growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. These folks have a lot to share, and I know they'll inspire you just as much as they inspired me. I'm so excited to have Mori Taheripour, who is a faculty member at Wharton, here with me today. I know you lots of ways. We're going to dive into that. But how would you describe yourself?
I think first and foremost, an entrepreneur, actually. Educator. Yeah, I think I would say those two things because they're probably the most defining.
And how do they go together?
So I've been an entrepreneur for the greater part of my career, really early on, and I actually never intended to be an educator. So that's the new add-on as of the last nearly 18 years. But an entrepreneur, sort of at heart, once I sort of delved in, and it was my consulting firm, I just never looked back. Have I worked for others during this time? Yeah, but I feel like I'm most in my spirit when it's my own thing. Yeah. And whether it's a joint venture, whether it's myself, I don't know. There's just the spirit of an entrepreneur, I think, runs deep. And as an educator, I was one of those people that, my parents wanted me to be a doctor. And once I let them down, then I realized that I really, this is cliche, but I wanted to do something that would help people, that would make a difference. Yeah. And I'm going to fast forward this, go to the executive summary version of this. But once I started teaching at Wharton, and I really sort of allowed myself, to trust my gut as far as teaching went, I fell in love with it. And, looking back now, it all kind of makes sense. Like, this was the path to helping people. Yeah. I just didn't realize that that's what it was supposed to be.
You said that your parents wanted you to become a doctor. How do they feel about your chosen profession now?
Well, like right now, I have two parents that live with dementia. So I don't know if they, they're sort of starting to kind of understand less.
Gotcha.
But quite honestly, I don't know. I have this sort of feeling that I let them down kind of my entire life with my decisions because they were unlike anything they had ever sort of wanted for me. I'm really different from the rest of my family in that way. I took chances. I put myself out there. I lived apart from them. And so sort of with every chapter, it feels like I moved further away from that which they had imagined for me. I'd like to think that it wasn't a complete disappointment.
Not at all.
But, they don't get
it.
Yeah, they imagined something else. And that's how they loved. Yeah. That's where they wanted to see me.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Where were you born?
Tehran, Iran.
What was that like?
Weirdly, I remember a lot of things vividly, and I think largely because we moved at the brink of the revolution. So sort of amidst the trauma and kind of getting uprooted, like being pulled out.
Sure.
So I remember certain things. I remember the freedom of it all, actually. I remember, women in like short skirts and, very sort of modernized, Americanized, what people don't imagine Iran to be.
That's
because in my adult years, it's become a sort of a religious state.
Yes.
But we have a beautiful culture. We have this very rich culture based on hospitality and generosity of spirit and food and gathering and togetherness that, my memories of living in Iran are just that. And it's beautiful. Like it's funny. People think Middle East, it must be hot, right? There's only one temperature. I've even heard, do you all have camels? No, not in Tehran because it's a populous city. But Tehran itself is like, it's in sort of a valley, but I remember the snow-capped mountains even. So we have, the terrain, the change in seasons, the but I remember the love and the family.
Sure.
Like I said, togetherness. It's a very, very rich and warm culture.
When we talk about entrepreneurship, people always think it's somebody being lonely and individual, but in reality, hopefully you can agree, entrepreneurship is a team sport. So I really want to know, who was on your team when you decided that you weren't going to be a doctor and you were going to do something else? Who was on your team?
Well, I started my business with a business partner. So in some ways, that was it,
Yeah.
right? It was the two of us. And I wish I had a greater team then. My family was like, you're going to do what? What are you talking about? Not only did you not become an entrepreneur, then you put business school on hold, and now this. So I think family was very distant in terms of their understanding or really support. My business partner was sort of my ace, really, because, and he was much, much older than me. So, it was the experience that he had that I sort of valued.
Sure.
And I just thought, this came to kind of bite me later, but I just thought he knew better because he had been around the world so many times. Sure. Outside of that, of course I had friends, but I don't know if anybody really gets it. You're always selling in some ways, right? You're trying to convince people why this was the right move. And frankly, I didn't do a whole lot of that. I had another friend who was sort of took the same path. He ended up making a lot more money because it was a startup that got bought out. But we were both applying to business schools at the same time. We both applied to Wharton. We then decided to take on these ventures.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, he was a support because we were sort of following the same path. And it was nice to have somebody who was sort of experiencing all those different, even the decisions that we made at that time together.
So you mentioned the partnership biting you. What was that about? Say more.
So we started, so just to give you a little bit more background, he used to be my boss. I was in public health, HIV/AIDS unit in Alameda County, Oakland, California. And when we started this company, I got this sort of very large grant to do this, so the rollout of this program for the entire state of California. Wow. And it sort of dropped in my lap in some ways. And I thought, well, I can't do this by myself. What do I know about this stuff? So he had retired, and I had sort of pulled him out of retirement. I said, can you do this with me? And I think the trajectory of the experience, the business, was such that because I started in a place where I just didn't trust myself.
Sure.
I didn't think I knew better. I was afraid. That this was sort of uncharted territory for me. Then I sort of relinquished, I think, that power and the decision making to him, sort of time and time again. Yeah. And it is not for him to take the blame. It's funny because the chapter in my book where we can talk about this later that I wrote, it was about this particular experience was the one I changed the most. And part of it was that it started off one way, which is sort of anger and what have you. It ended up I felt very empowered thinking about it because it's our decision to make. Our power is what we give up. Somebody doesn't take it from us.
That's right.
And I think that over the years, what I realized is that while we had been friends and I absolutely respected him, he was incredibly brilliant, we were different, I think, in the ways that matter. And that's sort of our convictions or our values. And I think that when those things are far apart, no matter what that delta is, right? Sure. And you can't find sort of an overlap in sort of your interests and those things that really matter to us most, then that's sort of what doesn't work, right? You can almost make anything else work, right? Yeah. You pick this, I pick that, we'll make this work, we disagree on this issue. But when it's something as deep as sort of decision-making based on your values, I think it's really hard. Yeah. We sort of dissolved the business. I couldn't really see myself doing that anymore. And I think that while it ended up being sort of holding on to a very large bag of debt, so it was an expensive lesson, but maybe fundamentally one of the most important because I realized that I was actually the person I should have trusted all along and that I didn't get lucky. Like, I didn't just, the state of California didn't just come to me and say, oh, you seem like the right person to give this to.
Lord knows no government just says,
Right.
I think you might be able to
Exactly.
do this. Yeah.
So I had earned it. And
Yeah,
I didn't,
absolutely.
it took all of that for me to realize that, so again, I took kind of that power back and realized that the ride I enjoyed, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It just, the lessons learned, I think, were really valuable.
I had the privilege to see you talk in front of hundreds of women, and you talked about women finding their power. And now that I hear your story, I'm wondering, is that why you spend so much time focusing on women entrepreneurs? Because it was so compelling, and too often they give up their power.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lifetime of experience. It's the entirety of our journey. I gave up my power to my family and sort of followed their dream for years. And like college, I wish I had done things differently, right? I'm not somebody that wants to spend sort of time steeped in regret. But funny story, I'll tell you, I went to my college reunion, the first reunion I went to, and my girlfriends I went to Barnard, and we just are silly together and sort of the belly laughs, and it's just love. And I remember, sort of the Columbia campus, it's really quite amazing. And you sort of walk through Columbia's sort of the college walk, and you look to your right, you look to your left, it's like Aristotle and Socrates. It's like amazing.
Yeah.
And we were laughing. And for a moment, I just looked up and started getting really sad. And in the midst of all this like fun, and I thought, what is this about?
Right.
And what I realized is that I at that moment thought, I wish I had done more with my college career. I wish I hadn't followed the path that somebody else had dreamt for me, but one that I had wanted for myself, because I have intellectual curiosity. I wish I'd taken religion classes and sociology classes and this, that, and the other. And I'm a psych major, but there were so many people who talk about political science classes they had taken and all this stuff. And
when at Barnard, you have amazing like adjuncts who come with like relevant topics.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's not too late to go back.
Well, hence I'm in academia now. But at that moment, and I thought, I gave up my power. I gave up my decision making. And so, yes, it's my entrepreneurial experience, but I think so much more. And all of these sort of decision points that we have that I am flawed. I don't teach from a perch of perfection. Yeah. I teach from a place of vulnerability and pain and success and fearlessness, I think.
Yeah.
And optimism, I think, at the end of the day. Passion that you have to have. But I also teach from a place of empathy. I have great empathy for people that go through this process. And,
Which I would say a lot of business professors do not do at all. As a fellow academic, I have to say that when I'm at Georgetown University, my peers, they're not talking about what we're talking about. They're not talking about race and gender and economic justice and their concern for labor. It just doesn't happen.
And it's, in academia, we're always told, like, don't bring certain subjects up in the classroom and this and the other. But, my classes, I teach negotiations, and not what you would imagine as negotiations, but in my classes, we cry always. There's such a place of safety that I think it's my responsibility to create, particularly in a world where every day we're asked to show up as something that we're not.
Yep.
And we then lose the courage to show up exactly as we want.
Yeah.
And so what I love about teaching is that I create the space for my students to be exactly who they are on that day, in that moment. And if they come in and they're upset, then we talk about it. If they come in and they're excited, we talk about that. If they're afraid because the world around us is so scary, I'm not going to be like, oh, and by the way, so now that we're here, let's just talk about, I can't.
That's right.
I don't have the wherewithal.
Yep.
And so I think that's what makes it so special. But if I did it any other way, I wouldn't love it as much as I do.
Right. What's the significance of crying?
So it's funny. It's I'm not very vulnerable outside of the classroom. To be really honest, I think my students know me better than anybody else in my life. I let them in just that much.
Sure.
And with that comes emotion.
Yeah.
And when I am excited, when I am, even afraid, maybe. They get to see all of that.
Sure.
I remember I teach, as you know, for Goldman Sachs, the 10,000 Small Business Program. And the first time, and I teach in 12 different cities, so they're all amazing. But I remember teaching in Detroit and arriving in Detroit that first time to teach. And, we all had in our heads what Detroit is, right?
Sure.
First only city to declare bankruptcy, right? Like all these things.
Right.
And so I had in my head, I had this image of what the class would be like or what this experience would be like. And I just remember walking into that classroom and getting this sort of overwhelming feeling of hope. And it was so weird. I didn't even expect, it literally, the exuberance and the acceptance and the welcoming nature of them but the hopefulness in a place where I thought their light had to have been dimmed.
Right. Because that's what all the news stories told us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful sort of tapestry of experience, color and different companies. But they had grit and they had hope and they had resilience and they were just so grateful that we were there. And I thought, this is amazing. And then I lost it. At the end of the class, I just started crying. And I was like, this is what it's supposed to be like. Because I don't want to be like, oh, this was so much fun. This was so great. What I felt at that moment was this profound experience of, first of all, gratitude that I had the opportunity to do this. But the hopefulness that they felt gave me, it just moved me.
Yeah.
And so the purpose of tears is that I am exactly where I am, and that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. And if that comes with tears, if that comes with happiness, whatever it is, then that's what they get to see. Because I ask that of them.
Sure.
I can't say be vulnerable and, oh, by the way, you won't know me at all. We share that experience.
So what are you most excited about right now?
So there's been sort of this evolution of what I do, and it's more than just an instructor in a lot of ways. I've coached my students, right? And some of that happens a lot of times outside the classroom, so in phone calls and smaller meetings, and so I'm kind of excited because I feel like I want to do more of that. Definitely with founders, like we talked about earlier. We've talked about this. Women of color, Black women. There's something so exciting about sort of where we are at this moment in time. And it's late coming, for certain.
Yes.
But it's also we could look back on that and feel sort of the pain of that and all that's been lost in terms of time and opportunity. Or we can look forward and think the world is going to see the brilliance of these women. Yeah. And it's like a catalytic shift that I feel like is coming. And so I'm excited to be a part of that world. Yeah. In whatever way is best and whatever way I'm most capable. Yeah. And to present some type of a opportunity that can help people achieve those dreams. And even if it fails, because a lot of entrepreneurial ventures fail, absolutely, then it wouldn't be failure so much as it would be, okay, and what's the next thing? And then the next thing, and then the next thing until, they achieve the type of success they want. I want to do that, I think. And I don't know how it's going to come. I don't know what shape it's going to come.
I can't wait.
But I feel it's like a transition.
I can't wait because I see the excitement. I can't wait. Speaking of changing lives, we have a mutual friend, Carl Carter, who was a guest on the podcast as well. And I'll never forget when we finally all realized that we were talking about the same Mori. He said, yeah, that woman changed my life. And I was like, I can see that. And clearly, because I've known him for 30 years, you changed him for the better. Who has changed your life?
All of my students.
How so?
Ooh, I'm going to get emotional on this one. One, to give me the opportunity to feel safe enough to be that vulnerable with them. But for teaching me everything from acceptance, joy, the grit that they have. To be honest with you, there's so many times that I've wanted to give up on what I was doing. And when I see them, I have them in New Orleans and New York and Detroit. Right. I mean, my heart is just full talking about them, but they are extraordinary. Yeah. Extraordinary in everything that they are. And they have this massive amount of courage despite all the odds. And they've just made it okay for me to feel like I'm flawed and feel like I'm, broken in so many ways, but to allow me to come in and do something that brings me great joy, and I think I'm pretty good at. And they've allowed me to find that.
Well, I got a chance to see you. I would say you're more than pretty good. You're damn good. I had the privilege to see you present in front of 180 women who, I have to be honest, when they showed up, I was just not sure they were going to make it. It was going to be rough. But I have to say, they were some resilient motherfuckers. And when you stood up there and you started talking about your journey, it was just fascinating that you were able to take them just out of their business classes and really think about what they need to do and how to conquer those challenges. And you say you talk about these stories in the book. Tell me more about this book.
So just as with my teaching, because I never imagined I'd be doing this, I was encouraged to write a negotiations book, just, again, because of how different my classes are.
Sure.
I don't teach from a prescriptive place. There's no formula in negotiations to me.
You don't tell people, hold out till you get what you want. Go high, start high, go low.
Mirroring, right? Mirroring drives me crazy. Like, they smile, you smile. They lean in, you lean in, and that's authenticity. No, it's really not. So I think what I was able to create in a classroom was really kind of special. Mm-hmm. And that person who sort of encouraged me to do, John Rogers, that Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
Was the first to do it. And he said, I think there's something here. It would be great if you captured this in a book. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not an author. Like, this is crazy. It took me a long time, like 4 years to be exact, to come up with sort of what I thought would be additive, because there's so many negotiations books out there. And I was like, I don't want to add to the fray. So then I thought, well, how can I then do something different? Yeah. Because I think my class is different, because I think my teaching is different. And so I started thinking about where there were gaps. And I realized that a lot of the gaps were created by myths. There are tremendous myths when it comes to negotiations, which is what actually brings so much anxiety to people, right?
Sure.
And one of those was, you have to be a certain type of person to be a great negotiator, right? We see them in movies. They're the headbutting, the forcefulness, the combativeness, right? And I thought, but for every one of those, there's somebody in our history or public figure or people that I've known that are not that at all, and they're quite successful.
That's right. They get what they want.
Right. And then I thought, so the one myth is I wanted to tell people, everybody's a great negotiator. And the reason why everybody can be a great negotiator is because you do it all day. Like, this is the soundtrack of our lives. From the moment you get up in the morning to the moment you go to sleep at night, you're doing it. So negotiations is such a big part of our lives. The other piece of this was that, again, a myth, because you have to sort of pretend to be somebody else, right? That it's really sort of denying yourself of who you really are in face of negotiations, right? And ultimately, what I really wanted my book to be about is an opportunity for people to look inward, understand who they are, honor who they are, have great clarity around the things that I believe are non-negotiables, which are our values and the convictions that we have, the things that are most important to us. And to then look at negotiations as a conversation, as a platform for you to be able to speak your voice and to speak your truth. And that we're all sort of set up, particularly women, I think, we're made for this, right? We are made for these conversations. We're made for the sense of empathy that we have, the emotional intelligence that we have, the problem-solving ability that we have, the emphasis on relationships. These are all things that make for great negotiators. And so, I wanted this to be a book that would provide that kind of sort of empowering conversation for people, but also a chance to self-reflect and know that the only person that they should bring to that conversation is themselves, their true, authentic self. And there was no formula for that.
What's the name of the book?
Bring Yourself.
I love it.
How to Harness the Power of Connection to Negotiate Fearlessly is the full title. But
love it.
Bring Yourself.
I love it. I love it. When you think about all that you've done, and let's put all the professional business stuff aside, what is your proudest personal moment?
I would say maybe a few. Okay. I say a few because I have to make lists for myself oftentimes when I have these bouts of imposter syndrome kind of, come upon me on a regular basis. So I make lists. The book is certainly one. It got released at a horrible time. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I had like a little bit of a pity party, like, oh my God, 10 years it's taken. This is what we have. Warehouses weren't delivering, Amazon wasn't delivering. But at the end of all of that, I still wrote a book.
Right.
And I was really proud of that.
Yeah.
What I did in the book is also really prideful because it's not a textbook. It's much of an autobiography, very, very self-revealing. And so I think, I'm not one to share a lot of things personally, but all of a sudden, like, I decided to tell the world. And so I think having had the courage to actually do that was a really big deal for me.
Because now that space that you found in your classroom is everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. That's huge.
I just got probably my 8th teaching award at Wharton.
Yay.
And I'm really proud of that because it says that what I've done actually works. And in academia, that kind of means something. I'm not a tenured professor. It's sort of like as a practicing professor, it's everything because the only people I actually care about are those students, right? And so they accepted it. They felt it was a value, and that's deeply meaningful to me.
If you were to describe your biggest challenge to someone who is possibly going through the same thing, what would that challenge be? And how would you tell them how to navigate it?
Not valuing myself. It's what I teach. Those who can't do, those who can't teach. It is a constant struggle because I carry the baggage of, my parents and, they're not happy with my choices. All these things, they play in the back of your mind. And so in some ways, I feel like I've lived a lifetime of disappointment, like disappointing those people that were most important to me. And I know that's not true, but that's sort of what I carry.
Gotcha.
And it can get in your way. It can prevent you from jumping into an opportunity that presents itself to you. And you're questioning whether you're able to or whether you're capable of. It gets in the way of literally, I think, everything. And so what I would tell people, and I think this is going to be book number 2, by the way.
All right, I'm ready.
Is that we all deserve better than that. Right? And yet we don't think we do.
Right.
And so this notion of deservedness and really sort of self-worth and self-value, I think plagues the best of us.
Yeah.
And we've read these stories, Maya Angelou and her struggle with imposter syndrome, the most prominent CEOs and what have you, people that we see as being successful. Viola Davis.
Yes.
In her amazing book. But when you read it, you're like, woman, you are queen. You are everything.
Right. You're an Academy Award winner.
This?
Right.
And so when you read that, you think this is the tie that bonds so many of us.
Yeah.
And we have to fight it every day because we are better and that we deserve better.
That's right.
Not because it's supposed to be given to us, but we've worked so hard for it.
Yeah.
And if not us, then who?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what I want to impart because I struggle with it all the time. And the reframing of the conversation, the audacity to have self-love, which is a weird thing to say, but the courage to have self-love is everything. Because what can we bring to the world if we can't show up full, right? Gratified, happy, joyous. So I think that's really important because I walk it every day and I know how hard it is.
I want to say thank you for coming to the porch.
Thank you.
And I know people have said it, but you are truly the best.
Thank you.
Now that I have had a chance to see you in action and watch how you transform those women, this is going to sound odd, but my greatest wish for you is that you receive that love back that you give to everybody every time you step into a classroom.
Thank you.
And you step on stage.
I appreciate that.
And most importantly, happy birthday.
Thank you, Melissa. It was so much fun doing this with people were like, you're actually working on your birthday? I said, but it's with the Melissa Bradley.
No, please. Yes.
Where else would I rather be? So
I'm grateful.
I'm grateful. And I want to say the same to you because I see the lives that you change. And I've seen you in the classroom and you just come to life, and it's pretty extraordinary. So thank you for doing what you do because we need more of you.
I appreciate it. Same to you.
Thank you.